All right. Hello, everyone. Mr. No Souls here. And today I'm going to be talking about, Steam's response to the New York Attorney General. Now, I have a previous video where I go through the Attorney General's general statements, what they're accusing Valve of, which is, long story short, that they've been for years operating as an illegal gambling house, and that they've been effectively assisting other people in breaking the New York State Constitution because apparently part of their Constitution is that gambling is not allowed. I wasn't actually aware of that until I read it in the document, so it was actually quite interesting. Now, I think it's kind of strange and a little ridiculous to say that for 20 years they've been operating blatantly out in the open illegally. It well, we'll get into this, and you'll see what I'm going to be saying. And if you saw the first video, you likely also know some of my opinions around the loot box controversy and the gambling and everything else. But we'll get into it at the end of this. Dear New York consumers of Counter Strike 2, Dota 2, and Team Fortress 2. You may have seen the New York Attorney General recently filed a lawsuit against Valve claiming mystery boxes like crates, cases, and chests in some of our games violate New York's gambling laws. We don't believe that they do, and we're disappointed to see the New York AG, Attorney General, make that claim after working to educate them about our virtual items and mystery boxes since they first reached out to us in early 2023. We rarely talk about litigation, but we felt we should explain the situation to you. Yeah, it's very straightforward. This is the letterhead to talk to the consumer about what they're effectively getting sued for. We shared with the New York Attorney General that these type of boxes in our game are widely used, not just in video games, but in the tangible world as well, where generations have grown up opening baseball card packs and blind boxes and bags and trading items and selling the items they receive. On the physical side, popular products used in this way include baseball cards, Pokemon, Magic the Gathering, Labubu, which I don't know what that is. In the game space, since digital packs similar to our boxes date back to 2004 are in a widespread use, players don't have to open mystery boxes to play Valve games. In fact, most of you don't open any boxes at all and just play the games because the items in the boxes are purely cosmetic. There is no disadvantage to players not spending money. This is all 100% true. Pokemon, and the reality is like you are also dealing with statistics when you're dealing with the physical like trading card games. They're effectively the exact same build. Loot boxes are almost a one-to-one parity to the card packs opening. That's a very fair statement. There's also like the like capsules that you can buy, not in the United States. I don't think they're particularly popular, but in Japan, like there's a little like pod capsule things you can go and buy as well. That deals with the exact same probability distribution. The big thing that is a difference between them is that the statistics aren't as openly available because they discuss that online. Like they show the distributions of like what the individual packs have and what you're likely to get and everything, and you can find that for the physical cards as well, but it's kind of an unfortunate situation that both of them really do deal with statistical probability. You do hand over money and you do have the random chance of getting, less than the money you put in buying the pack, or you could potentially make more money. Um, yeah. So that's effectively what they're equating to. Like they're saying, hey, if you're saying we're illegal, you also have to say a bunch of other things are illegal as well. In the process of cooperating with the New York Attorney General's investigation, we shared with them our efforts over many years to shut down accounts found to be using Valve game items on gambling sites in violation of Steam's subscriber agreement, which is true. We also shared with them our efforts to combat fraud and theft of user items, and our extraordinary measures to stop gambling sites from taking advantage of Steam accounts and Valve game items. Valve does not cooperate with gambling sites. This is also true. The sites that they have assisted and supported, and I even point this out in the previous video talking about what the Attorney General was saying they allowed, were not gambling sites. They were real money transactions. They assisted the market, but these sites were one-to-one purchasing where you purchased directly the item that you wanted. It was in no way an obfuscation of chance that you could get something other than what you were directly purchasing. And Valve did not go and support like any group that was gambling. They only supported groups that were doing real money transactions for one-to-one purchase. That is a thing. Now, to date, we've locked over 1 million Steam accounts that were being misused by third parties to connect with gambling, fraud, and theft. That's true. They're actually notoriously hardcore on cracking down on these three things. Like, Steam is known to be good about catching fraud and theft. We've also shipped features like trade reversals and trade cooldowns to discourage gambling sites' ability to operate and protect Steam users from fraud. That's also true. We forbid any gambling-related business to participate in or sponsor tournaments for our games. Also true. I think there's been attempts by third parties to get involved, but I think Steam directly has squashed those as well. Like for like small third-party like tournaments and stuff like that. We have serious concerns with many of these alterations the New York Attorney General claims are necessary to make to our games. It's not alterations they're claiming. They're claiming they straight up were like masquerading as a gambling house. That is a very nice way of saying how the New York Attorney General is framing them. First, the New York Attorney General seems to believe boxes and their contents should not be transferable. Yeah, that's probably true. Just because that would nip everything that they're talking about in the butt as far as like the secondary gambling and everything else and the risks. Yeah, that's a thing, but then there still is no way to stop someone from selling their games account or anything else to someone else. Like there could still be gambling or other things done through other means, but there is no way to actually stop the transference of goods. It would just need to be more wholesale. They appear to assume digital mystery box and the items in our games are different from tangible items like baseball card packs, which contain random items. And that's true. They are almost identical in principle and in action. And to take issue with the fact that users have the ability to transfer items they receive through Steam trading or user-to-user sales on the community market. We think the transferability of digital game items is good for consumers. Interesting. It gives a user the ability to sell or trade an old or unwanted item for something else, in the same way an owner can sell or trade a tangible item like a Pokemon or baseball card. The New York Attorney General proposes to take away users' ability to transfer their digital items from Valve games. Transferability is a right we believe should not be taken away, and we refuse to do that. I don't even blame them. Like, it's their own market. Effectively, I think really the problem is with the loot boxes themselves. It's less with this secondary stuff. As long as they're not gambling, transferability is not really a problem. If people are seeing directly what they are purchasing, like there is no problem with purchasing something that you want. It is not illegal. It is not a restricted substance. Sorry, I speak English, I swear. It's not like there is anything inherently wrong with purchasing a good or service that you want that does not harm anyone. But the New York Attorney General is trying to crack down on this for some reason. Like, people should be able to purchase whatever they want. The loot box is an entirely separate problem than the RTM purchasing of goods and services that they desire. And that, like, Steam is kind of willing to let them conflate two different problems because it gives them more leverage to stand upon to say, hey, no, our loot boxes aren't a problem. But, yeah. It is a thing. The New York Attorney General also proposes to gather additional information beyond what we normally collect in the course of our process payments about each game user on the off chance someone in New York has anonymized their location to appear outside of New York, such as using a VPN. This would have involved implementing invasive technologies for every user worldwide, which is 100% true and ridiculous to go and push anyone to go and do such a thing. Similar, the New York Attorney General demands that Valve collects more personal data about our users to do additional age verification, which is completely ridiculous. It's not a realistic solution. Really, there should be restrictions upon credit cards and there should be parental controls. It is the parents' responsibility at the end of the day to make sure that children that they are responsible for are behaving appropriately. Why are businesses being asked to do the job of parents? And that's just the simple fact. You are supposed to go and have these controls. And the fact that parental controls are not adequate to properly go and monitor the children is a parent problem. And like you can say like Windows should have a way for like parents to have more accurate control over their children. That's fine. But there should not be any sort of like checks or systems built into the companies to do this. Corporations should not be doing these kind of checks and systems. Like it should be done in an offline setting so it's not getting constantly broadcasted to the internet. It should be based upon the parent setting controls of what the child is and isn't allowed to do. And that configuration should just be a default that parents are able to easily monitor and control this. And this entire of like, oh, we need to protect the children, like, because it's the state's like job. No, it's not the state's job. It's the parent's job. The state has nothing to do with this. The state has things like, is it legal or is it illegal? That is, their job. But giving a moral imperative, I fundamentally disagree. And it's frankly just a giant mask for the government to be able to track individuals and know who exactly is purchasing what and doing what and where their like money is going. Like, that's a whole nother thing. I'm not going to conflate these two things. What they're doing here, though, is frankly ridiculous, and it's just another attack on anonymization and data security and privacy. Like, that's what that is. Valve knows our users care about security and of their personal information. Everyone cares about that. Everyone cares about that. And we believe it is ours and their interest to only collect the information necessary to operate the business and comply with law. Exactly. So unless they change the law, this is ridiculous to assume that Valve has to do jack for them. I swear, I nearly did, but I didn't. We respect New York's right to determine the laws governing behind in the state, which is true. We will, of course, comply if the New York legislature. Am I speaking English anymore? Jesus. My tongue is turned into lead. Passes laws governing mystery boxes, loot boxes, whatever. Something it has not done despite considering the issue a few times. Such laws would be the result of the public process, presumably with input from the industry and New York gamers. Which is a fair, normal, and valid way of going about changing law. It's unusual that they're effectively trying to use No. Is it the judicial branch? Yeah, it's the judicial branch to effectively retroactively change like the thoughts and opinions of like multiple things. This is normally something that the executive branch is involved with, and also the legislative branch. Like those two normally work in conjecture, and then like on the back end, if people aren't compliant with the laws, they go and they go for judicial. But this is a little bit different. The type of comments from the New York Attorney General demands that Valve went far beyond what existing New York law requires and even beyond the New York itself. It may have been easier and cheaper for Valve to make a deal with the New York Attorney General, but we believe the type of deal that would satisfy the New York Attorney General would have been bad for users and other game developers and impacted our ability to innovate in game design, which is 100% true. On top of the fact, like, it would fundamentally change the nature of how Steam operates. Like, it would turn into effective spyware if, like, what they're wanting is that much information to even be able to breach VPNs. Like, like, if this is exactly true, which isn't in the court case that the New York Attorney General asked for, if this is true, would be a fundamental change in the operation of the entirety of Valve. Like, payment processing, how you go and identify users, how the metadata is being stored and categorized. Like, this, as a data engineer, this has massive implications. If it's true. Granted, I do generally believe Valve. They haven't been caught lying, so actually, I don't believe they've ever been caught lying. So yeah, that is a thing. In addition, although this case is about mystery boxes, we feel the need to address comments made by the New York Attorney General about games, real-world violence, and children. These extraneous comments are a distraction and a mischaracterization we've all heard before. Numerous studies throughout the years have concluded that there is no link between media, movies, TVs, books, comics, music, and games, and real-world violence. Indeed, many studies highlight the beneficial impact of games to users. Ultimately, a court will dictate whose position, ours or the New York Attorney General's, is correct. In the meantime, we wanted to make sure you are aware of the potential impacts to users in New York and elsewhere. March 11th, 2026. So this is what Valve has put out in response. It was a little bit earlier. I'm going to be looking to see if there's any other statements that they've put out, but this is what they communicated on Steam themselves so far. Okay, so I went to the actual New York State on a unified court system where they go and they have all the documents submitted to the court of like statements and everything else. And you can see here the summons, the complaints, authorizations that are going on, appearances, and so on. Here you can see the. Actually, was it this one? This is when they registered the original like notice of motion, and this is the affidavit. Okay, where is it? And then this is likely going to be the actual. Yeah, here we go. This is the document that I went through in my original video of all their claimants, what they want happen, their supporting arguments, and so on. So that's all that. So once you're through all of this, you can see they actually did put the Valve Steam subscriber agreement dated April 30th, 2014. So the 2014 Steam subscriber agreement. Here, though, you can see Steam's official court response, not what I was going about earlier, which is just their unofficial, hey, explaining their thoughts and opinions. This is their, lawyer speak and everything else of why they think they didn't do anything illegal. It's formatted the exact same way as, well, frankly, the New York Attorney General, and it starts off with their preliminary statement in defense. People enjoy surprises. Part of the appeal of many popular collectibles, from baseball cards to cereal box prizes, is the possibility of opening a sealed package and being surprised with a rare item. That is true. There is an element of randomness in opening a baseball card pack, including a one-of-a-kind Aaron Judge rookie card. No legislature or court has ever deemed that act illegal gambling. That is also true. The New York State Attorney General, NIAG, now asks that this court do just that, which is 100% true. The NIAG alleges that Valve Corporation, Valve, is promoting gambling in violation of the New York penal law and state constitution by selling the digital equivalent of baseball card packs. mystery boxes that, upon opening, reveal one random digital item from a set of options. Like baseball cards, these digital items, called skins, are designed for entertainment and have subjective and aesthetic value to users. They do not affect gameplay and simply alter a player's in game appearance. Now, I do want to point something out. Actually, they sometimes do affect gameplay. If you cannot properly identify what someone is at times, you make a misjudgment. And the sheer variety of skins sometimes throws people off thinking, hey, this is some particular gun, but it actually might be something else that you just misidentified due to the skin. Or I'm going to use Hunt Showdown. You can't actually see some of the characters. There's one guy who is like a skull face and is entirely in black, and that dude just blends into the background. So the statement that skins don't necessarily have impact on gameplay isn't exactly true. They can have impact on gameplay, but it's limited. It's not like it's a mechanical benefit, like this gun shoots harder now because it has this skin. It's a less tangible effect. But generally speaking, I would say that this is actually true. As with baseball cards, collectors have established secondary markets for skins with resale prices based on desirability. I don't understand why they went for baseball cards. They probably chose it due to the historic nature of it being America's favorite pastime. That's the slogan for it. And it's been around since, what, 1800s? I mean, it maybe at least 1900s. Baseball's been around for a very, very long time, and I think those are like the first collectible trading cards that were made, possibly ever. So, yeah, the statement of that is probably why they're going with like baseball cards, even though like Pokemon or Magic the Gathering might make more sense in the fantasy like aspect. But yeah, there are common features in countless video games, not just Valve's, and are enjoyed by millions of people worldwide. Despite the overwhelming similarity between mystery boxes and the familiar collectibles like baseball cards, New York is now asserting that offering mystery boxes facilitate gambling, which is a very fair like statement that yeah, they are actually really, really similar. Unsurprisingly, this assertion finds no support in statutory text, case law, or common sense. The New York Attorney General claims should be dismissed, which I think in the way that they are doing it, the New York Attorney General does have a difficult position to hold. And I think it's not necessarily unfair that, Valve is asking for a straight up dismissal of the case. I think the New York Attorney General should have maybe gone about this a little bit of a different way. And at the very least, why go after Steam of all the possible defendants? Like, there are multiple corporations that should be brought up here. Like, Steam is not the one you should first be looking at for this. Now, granted, I think Steam is maybe one of the biggest dogs you could potentially just bring in, but they are far, far from the one that makes the most sense to pull. To begin, the New York State Constitution prohibits against illegal gambling and does not provide a standalone cause of action because it is not self-executing. That is enough to dismiss count one. To begin, the New York State prohibits against illegal gambling does not provide a standalone cause of action. Well, no law is self-executing. I think if someone has a better grounding on legal status or like legal statements, I don't actually know a standalone cause of action. I'm gonna just try to look this up and like get an explanation of it. So, not self-executing means that the provision merely established a broad principle or policy rather than creating a readily enforceable right or legal claim. Ah, okay. So it's saying that it's effectively acting as more of a guideline when the gambling clause fails. This Article 1, Section 9 of the New York State Constitution states that no lottery or sale of lottery tickets, pool selling, booking, making, or any other type of gambling shall be authorized unless specifically exempt. So they're saying that while it's not necessarily authorized, it doesn't necessarily constitute a right to sue them. The lack of standalone cause of action because of the Constitution simply sets a general prohibition but delegates the creation of specific offenses and penalties and enforcement mechanisms to the New York State legislation and cannot be cited alone as a bias of a lawsuit because it actually needs to go to the legislation first to then go and specify whether or not it does adhere or not adhere. So effectively, they're saying that they're jumping the gun, that they are going to the judicial branch to punish them before there is actually specific legislation denoting them as being in violation of the Constitution. That is what they're effectively trying to claim, if my understanding is correct. The role of statute is to actually bring a claim seeking damages or persecuting an offense. A plaintiff or government entity must base their case on enacted, implemented statuses, such as those found in the New York penal law about like racing and pari multiple wagering and breeding law. So, long story short, loot boxes and card games aren't recognized as gambling. Them jumping to a lawsuit is jumping the gun and is not allowing due notice that they are breaking the law, which I think is actually, now that I have a better understanding of what they're saying, like, yeah, that makes sense. And that actually runs in line with what my effective thought was on the earlier statements that the New York Attorney General was making. Is like, they've been doing this for over 20 years. And if you're counting baseball cards, they've been doing it, what, for 50 years at least? 60 years? They've never once been sued. And they've been operating in New York fine and paying like taxes and everything else. So, like, how on earth are they suing them when they've been operating out openly and they haven't gone in, like, this is a legislative issue that needs to be discussed on the floor, not something that needs to be judged because there is no precedent. There is no other ever case of this being claimed as gambling. Now, this could be an attempt to create precedents, but it's kind of operating nebulously because, yes, there is things that give guidance that you're not supposed to do this, but there is no legislation saying, hey, this is indeed breaking of the guidance. So, count 1. Count 2 and 3 must be dismissed because the sale of mystery boxes is not gambling under the plain statutory language. Interesting, but let's see. A person engages in gambling when he stakes or risks something of value upon an outcome of a contest of chance, upon an agreement or understanding that he will receive something of value in the event of a certain outcome. I'm going to be real, that sounds like a loot box. And they call out this particular penal. Well, that's a little bit of a annoyance. Okay, well, New York Attorney General attempts to apply this plain text to mystery box fails at every turn. I have to say, like, Valve's writing is so much easier to read and understand. Like, yeah, okay, that was dense, but it's just so much, like, oh my gosh, this is so much nicer to read. Let's see here. Sorry, I just attempts plain text and mystery boxes fail at every turn because every player always receives exactly what they paid for. 1 skin per mystery box. There is no stake or risk. And okay, yeah, that's an argument, I suppose, but I just want to point out that like there is actually a risk though, because you've introduced a secondary sale of an item and the item sells for under what you originally purchased. Like you could argue that, but I see Valve's point. Like there is a one-to-one transaction, but there's a variability on what you get. Instead, it would have been better just to entirely remove the entire chance aspect and just allow people to directly purchase whatever skins that they want. That is a far more consumer friendly practice. And because there is a probability distribution involved with it, that is effectively gambling on what you're going to get, especially when you're looking for one specific item. While users enjoy and subjectively value skins, they are not money, property, tokens exchangeable for money or property, credit, or promises. So, as a matter of law, they are not something of value as the term is defined under the New York gambling law. And I'm going to guess that this also does the exact same. Yeah, that is so frustrating. Why is there a wall between going to like law? Maybe this is a matter of like Valve shouldn't have been going to there or something, and they should have just like an open source version of the document, but whatever. And because players pay Valve a flat fee to receive a random skin rather than pooling their money in a game of chance, there's no wagering agreement with Valve. I mean, there are many different types of gambling. You don't have to necessarily playing like roulettes to be doing slots or something, different. But okay, I can see where they're going with this. The New York Attorney General also fails to plausibly allege that Valve knowingly violated the law, which I think is a very true statement because there is no previous case and there is actually long-standing precedence of it being allowed. So why would they assume that this is gambling? Like, yeah, that right there is very fair. As the statute requires, Valve has openly offered mystery boxes and paid New York state taxes on those purchases, which is a point I made even. For more than a decade, another point that I even said, without objections from the New York Attorney General or any other regulator, which is why there is no precedence and there's no other reason on why on earth is this going to the judicial branch for punishment when there is no precedence or statement from legislation or executive on this. Like, this is putting the cart before the horse. And no other state has ever criminalized mystery boxes, which is true. Now, granted, globally, there are indeed countries that have gone and said, this is indeed gambling. This cannot be allowed to be done to minors. Like, there is precedence globally, but there is not US state law precedence, and there is no other recognized group that would accept global legislation for their own, setting of precedence. So, this is a fair statement. Moreover, the fact that no one until now even suspected that New York's laws might criminalize Valve's conduct, meaning the New York Attorney General's attempted application of these laws violates several constitutional protections. Yeah, that's a very fair statement. First, Valve lacked fair notice that its conduct should be subject to criminal prosecutions. Yeah, that is 100% fair. In violation of due process. Yeah, that is actually a very good point. That is a violation of due process. There was no warning, and there was no reason for them to assume that they were breaking criminal prosecution or doing like a criminal prosecution for this thing. And normally there is a due process before, you're charged as a criminal. Second, New York Attorney General overboard interpretations of the gambling law violates the First Amendment of chilling protected video games and other content. Now, that isn't exactly true because that the loot boxes themselves are not art. Now, maybe you're still able to go and draw loot box art if you really want. Hell, you could make yaoi art things of loot boxes of different types if you want. What this is effectively doing, though, is the New York Attorney General is trying to curb the proliferation of loot boxes inside of the gaming sphere, which, yeah, is fair and fine, but they're not really stopping people from drawing art, you know. Third, the New York Attorney General has usurped the legislature's role in violating the New York Constitution separation of power doctrine by extending the reach of the gambling statutes to retroactively criminalize previous legal conduct. Yeah, that's fair. And actually, that would. Actually, it would also. This is a fair point because then habeas corpus. Is it habeas corpus? You're not able to go and charge someone for something that has only now been declared as a crime. By effectively going and doing it this way, they're trying to force someone to simultaneously be identified as being a lawbreaker and also saying the back date was years in the past. Like, this is trying to make a 1-2 punch tandem warhead directly into Valve, which actually could be viewed as a due process break. I actually think that's a very smart legal point out. And also entirely fair to say. Like, this has not been identified as gambling legally up until now. And it's like only recently we've really come to the conclusion collectively that yes, loot boxes are a form of gambling. Like, colloquially as people. I've never heard someone say loot boxes are not gambling. Like, this is the first time I've ever heard it, but, you know, they're trying to slow the roll. Courts have consistently held that because only the legislature can define what a crime is, the ambiguity in a criminal statute must be resolved in favor of defendants. And that's true, but again, this is going to result... Yeah, so can't do it. Even the slightest doubt requires dismissal. Gosh, I wish I could, like... whatever. Here, there is more than just doubt. Indeed, the legislature has repeatedly considered and rejected bills that would have regulated the monetization of mystery boxes. I actually don't know any bills where this has been done. Gosh darn it. I'm going to go and actually, like, fact check this in a 5-second, like... 2019 Detour Act. Yes, but what legislation is this exactly tied to? What is the name of the bill? Okay, so this is a direct link to whatever certain pay-to-win, only pay-to-win microtransactions and sales of loot boxes in interactive. Yeah. That is... Yeah, this is definitely a legislation, and I don't think this was adopted. But yes, this would, in theory, I am just perusing through it, but right there in the front, like, this is legislation to deal with it. It wasn't accepted. So Valve does have a statement that rejected bills that would have regulated this. So there is no precedent to go and claim that they are actually breaking the law. Allowing this case to continue would inject uncertainty into hundreds of daily commercial transactions, which is actually true. That it, I mean, I don't know if millions is right. Hundreds of thousands, probably. Definitely more than hundreds. But this is only applying to New York, so actually maybe hundreds is correct. Law is a very complicated and messy thing. Allowing this case to continue would inject. Sorry. Can parents purchase packs of baseball cards for their children? Which is fair. And I would say yes, that is a fair thing. Can families go to Chuck E. Cheese to play games of chance and exchange winning tickets for prizes? See, that is different though, because there is skill involved with that. But I understand what they're going for. Like, that is a fair point. Because, again, that is a conversation for the legislative branch. And maybe this is a real fancy way of the New York attorneys general is trying to force the legislative branch to like seriously look at it, by putting the cart before the horse and trying to cause a crash. You know, maybe that's their strategy, and they actually don't want this to succeed, and that's why they went after everyone's golden child. Like, maybe it's just like some 4D like chess thing, but yeah. Can a child reach into a cereal box and grab a surprise toy? All these actions and more could lead to chargeable crimes under the New York Attorney General's interpretation of gambling. This court should not permit such a nonsensical outcome. It should dismiss this misguided lawsuit with prejudice. I disagree with that. I don't think it should be done with prejudice. However, I do think that it should go to legislation and, well, I actually don't know enough to be able to make any kind of assertion on that, like with prejudice part. This is way too complicated for me, and like this really should be a conversation with multiple people and like watchdog groups and consumer advocates and stuff like that being talked about. Like, this is a massive implication. They're 100% right that it has a wide reaching impact. And it should not be going to the judicial branch to punish them before there has been legislative branch decisions done and legislation passed to go and decide what, you know, is and isn't illegal. So, 100% fair. Summary of allegations. Valve created a game with millions of users to enjoy. Valve developers created a treasure 100 million users, half a decade, past 2.5 decades. Enduring success of its game, robust ecosystem, operates Steam, popular game platform. Players can purchase virtual items to enhance gameplay experience, which is true. Players cannot redeem virtual items for cash, not directly through Valve. I mean, and that's like, that is why I'm kind of pointing out like the real money transaction, like pull out kind of thing. Like, this is a fair thing to say. They can't actually say that Valve is allowing them to cash out digital things for fiat currency. Jeez, I speak English. Like casino chips. And that's a fair thing to go and say. Because Valve isn't involved with that. They're allowing it to be turned into digital currency that then you could use to buy games, but that's kind of murky water. Like, no actual currency is changing. You're effectively turning skins into games. So a digital to digital transaction. It's interesting, but that's again a very separate like conversation that needs to happen. It's actually more similar to operating like a bank in a way, because when you are going and you are determining like a one-to-one transaction value, and because they're also dictating some degree when sales happens, they can actually like effectively try to go and equate like skins that are purchased to then being actual set value inside of a video game, because like you're able to go and get those kind of like cosmetics and other things in other games through like the Steam wallet. But again, that is an entirely separate thing and is way more complicated than just what this is going on. And the New York Attorney General isn't able to make that claimant. That, I don't even know if research really has been done into like Steam's ability and controls over like sales and stuff like that. and how that is like impacted by the Steam wallet and like transactions between skins and everything else. Like this is like a public dissertation uh for like a doctoral thesis. Like this is a extremely complicated topic. And I look, I just have a master's in just data science with a focus in data engineering from Northwestern. This is far beyond anything we can realistically say at this time that we actually have an understanding of. Nevertheless, the New York Attorney General alleges it is possible to redeem skins for cash through multiple independent transactions with third parties, which is something that they claim. For example, the FAC alleges that one of their investigators sold the skins at the community market for Steam Wallet funds, used the Steam Wallet funds to buy hardware, and finally sold the hardware for cash at a local brick and mortar store that trades in secondhand electronics, which is kind of a novel thing. Alleges it's possible to obtain cash through private sales on third-party websites unaffiliated with Valve's. The New York Attorney General claims Valve has not done enough to stop those third-party sites, but acknowledges that Steam's subscriber agreement prohibits the sales of skin off-platform. They don't allege that Valve receives direct financial benefits from these third-party transactions. So, yeah, I actually kind of missed, like when I was reading that case and how they did that. Yeah, actually, that actually is a novel take. But yeah, that I don't. Valve accepting to consume their own digital currency, even if the digital currency is supposed to be representative of US dollar valuation, like, hmm, that's another doctoral thesis right there. That is some heavy philosophy. It's an interesting and novel use for the Steam wallet, especially because like Steam Deck and Steam Machine and everything else. But hmm, I don't know enough to be able to make any form of opinion on this at this time. I have opinions on other things because I've spent years thinking about it. And, I've also studied like a good bit of economics. I'm no economist, I'm no like authoritative figure. I might be firm in my assertions, but there is fundamental differences between, you know, having knowledge to be able to equate digital currency to hardware cash and how that exactly is impacting brick and mortar stores and how there could be potential use for gambling in that is a whole can of worms that I don't understand. They also claim executive law. Count one alleges Valve violated the gambling prohibition. Count two and three that they promoted it in the first and second degree. We've gone over that earlier. Acknowledges that unlike illegal casinos, Valve has openly offered mystery boxes for over a decade. It has paid New York State. That's just honestly, it's funny to the point that I have to wonder if they're just taking the piss of them. Like, if they're just being rude. Like, are you idiots? Like, is this why you are going to criminal charges with this? Like, that is. Whew, they are. No one can say Valve doesn't have a sense of humor. They know how to stick it to someone and make you laugh while doing it. And this is an extremely dry document. They identify no legislative act or court decisions anywhere in the country that has criminalized mystery boxes, which is true. Nor do they acknowledge that New York recently sought to regulate mystery boxes in the amendment to the general business law, not the penal law or Article 25. Even though that legislation simply would have required certain disclosures about mystery boxes, it could not have banned them. And that's true. Currently, the legislature is considering amending the racing breeding laws to forbid boxes with repurchasable contents. Neither bill would criminalize mystery boxes as gambling or suggest that the legislature consider mystery boxes to currently be unlawful under Article 25, which is true. Rather than allowing the legislative proceedings to play out, the New York Attorney General brought this case, and it seeks to do far more than regulate mystery boxes, which is true. They are looking for effectively like massive penalties that would, I don't think it would bankrupt Steam, but it would hurt Steam like nothing has ever done before, which is ridiculous because there is no like preceding case to make these claims. So their argument, these documents are just huge. So the argument, I'm going to pause here actually. I've been at this for quite a while. I need to go get some food in me before I continue with this. Okay, I'm back. I've eaten. Ooh, let's get on with this. So, argument. The New York Constitution prohibits against gambling, does not create a standalone cause of action. Yeah, because the New York Constitution prohibits against gambling, does not authorize New York to initiate enforcement actions. Count 1 must be dismissed. Provides that no lottery authorized allowing within the state the legislature shall pass appropriate laws to prevent those offenses. Emphasis added. Oh. And the legislature shall pass laws to prevent those offenses. So effectively, it's pointing out that this claimant is for the creation of laws and is merely framement, like infrastructure legally, to actually go and build upon it as legal superstructure for prosecution and so on. And since this is infrastructure and not the actual, meat, it's bones, they're not allowed to just go immediately to prosecution, which is using the superstructure that would be built upon it. In 1908, they recognized the parent, and this is going to be another one of those things. Yeah, okay. So none of these I'm going to be able to see, but they actually. Wow, that's a lot of cases. It is black letter law that a non-self-executing constitutional provision does not criminalize any conduct absent implementing legislation. Yeah, so right there they just showed that they can't be, sued for this because there's no legislation saying that they actually are doing something illegal. A civil damage remedy cannot be implemented for a violation of the state constitution provision unless its proving is self-executing without the necessity for supplementary or enabling legislation. Yeah, and they pretty much said it's not self-executing and there's no supplementary or enabling legislation. I think Steam effectively has a really good point that the Attorney General doesn't have self-executing law and doesn't have preceding court cases to reference that there are indeed laws in which they are breaching. As such, yeah, they might have something with prejudice possible. To our knowledge, no court has permitted any Attorney General to bring an enforcement action directly under Section 9. Quite opposite. New York courts have held that even if gambling is unlawful under Section 9, it is not punishable as a crime until the legislature says itself. Oof. And that's an entirely, hold up, beach. Is that the same beach? I don't know if this is the exact same one or maybe it's another case with the same people involved. No person may be arrested for violating if the only penalty for violating the law prescribed was forfeiture of the amount wagered in civil action. Yeah, it is. Civil action just means, like, from my understanding, it's like people just doing general, like, transactions. It's not like business transactions would be, like, viewed as something else, like a business to business transaction, but this is like a store and a person. it's considered a civil transaction. It's my understanding. Am I? Well, let's just go. What it or no? Between private individuals, businesses, or government entities. Oh, so it's not transaction. It's literally just disputes. But they're arguing that it is criminal. And Valve stating that it's non-criminal because it's not self-executing. Which they're not breaching agreements, failure to pay, or failures to perform. They're. I don't think there's a case of negligence or any of this. Property disputes. Nope, none of those. So, interesting. Nor does the Executive Law 6312 supply the necessary cause of action. Section 6312 does not substantively prohibit any conduct. It is a vehicle that authorizes to seek certain remedies for violations other prescribed, which is to go to the legislature. Yeah, they're arguing that there's no substantive law to determine that liability. Honestly, the fact that they're actually able to stand on precedence, this is a huge block of supporting arguments that this is a continuation of applied law, while the Attorney General, effectively because they were going straight to the judicial branch to try and get a verdict. Yeah, they're not really standing on any precedent. Meanwhile, Steam's point in case that they're making is standing on precedent. Are not gambling under new. I see. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think it falls within the description of it, but I don't think it's recognized by law. I don't think trading cards are recognized by law. But, that's neither here nor there. In any event, Valve's offering of mystery boxes does not promote gambling under the New York Constitution or any provisions of the New York law because New York gambling laws are criminal statutes. Oh, so they're not saying that they're not necessarily gambling. They're saying that they aren't illegal because they're not under criminal statute. Claims against Valve can only succeed if the laws unambiguously covers Valve's mystery boxes. They do not come close. And that is exactly true. This right here is a pretty solid point because all the proceedings, and that's a fundamental, like that right there is a fundamental hole in the boat. The New York Court of Appeals has interpreted gambling under Section 9 of the New York Constitution to prohibit the risking of money or something of value on games of chance, as well as betting and wagers by non participants on the competition of skill. This construction mirrors the penal law definition. A person engages in gambling when he stakes or risks something of value upon the outcome. So this is just restating it again. Helpful guidepost and determine the meaning of gambling in Section 9. Previous, because players do not stake or risk anything when purchasing a mystery box. A skin is not something of value, and there is no wager agreement between the player and Valve. That's... I don't know about that, because you have multiple potential options with one purchase. and which way you are not explicitly wagering, but it's like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Hey, you could get $1,000 item, you could get a 90 cents item. Like, I see their point. Like up here, this is way stronger. This, if they get it thrown out with prejudice, would protect them from having anything to do with this particular problem later on. And this is a really important part because there is a serious question on whether or not, gambling is occurring explicitly or implicitly. Stake or risk element is absent because players make a simple purchase. Yeah, and so is a simple purchase of doing a roulette wheel or a slot machine. Theory fails right at the gate because Valve's offering mystery boxes does not entail any stake or risk to finding gambling under 5 article or any other statute criminalizing. Gambling spending money is not enough. Must establish the possibility of forfeiture or loss, which you are forfeiting your money, and there is technically the risk of what you might receive is not worth the amount of money that you've spent. That is actually a loss. Now, granted, their argument is that all skins are equally worth one value and that no skin is inherently worth more than another, or whatever they're trying to claim, or like maybe they're trying to ignore the tiering system, because like part of this falls apart when you look at the tier system for the loot boxes. And like this is the same for Overwatch, this is the same for like Smite, this is the same for pretty much every single version of loot boxing. The reality is it's not one collective pool with everything having an equal distributive probability. What you have, and even cards have the exact same thing going on with them. What you effectively have is they are trying to claim everything is on a level playing field. Therefore, there is no inherent increase or decrease of risk, which isn't exactly true. There is a degree of risk because there is actually certain things with higher percentages of receiving and lower percentages of receiving. And if you go purely and stratify it based upon monetary cost and actually ignore the tiering system entirety, you even see that the tiers aren't really like where the valuation is. Inside a tier, there can be a wide variety of like value. And like a tier 2 item might be more valuable in some cases than tier 3 items. So it's not Valve themselves really setting what the valuation is. It's the market that sets the valuation. And like the Attorney General I don't think they did a really good job pointing this out, but like the RTM transactions are determining a certain set of value, and they're trying to say that it is fueling gambling behavior and Valve is indirectly supporting it, I think is what they're trying to say, but they didn't do a very good job saying it, and I still don't think that's right because that's secondary to Valve. But I think that is what they're going for. And I think Valve is frankly wrong that there is no loss. Payment of $250 to a movie premiere where attendees were given chips to play casino games for prizes was not a stake or risk. Really? So they spent $250 to go to a movie premiere, then they got chips to play casino. Well, I'd have to say, is it a fixed amount of chips? Like everyone was given the same amount to the 250, or were they just ever flowing number of chips and they could just get whatever prizes they got? Because there's some nuance to this, but that is interesting, and I think that would be a very good way to defend this point and reinforce it. Their legal team's good. Their legal team is very good. Cohn versus Kohler, 96 New York. Person engaged in gambling where he may draw prizes or may draw blank, and he thus hazards what he has paid upon the chances incident by drawing lot by drawing into a drawing by lot. Yeah. Well, they're saying that you can only gamble if there is an entire forfeiture of assets and there is no potential of money at all. And I fundamentally disagree with that. I think that there is the way like the current gambling system works, I think it's more complicated than historically. Yeah, the historical precedence of how gambling has worked has evolved with the digital age. And I don't necessarily think that this is fair to say the lot system is truly the end all be all. Applying these straightforward principles, their claim can't succeed. I disagree. There is a little bit of argument, I think, but I think that they have a fair point that precedence still rules in their favor. Players do not stake or risk anything when they open a mystery box or use armory credits. I disagree. They stake their money. Rather, they pay a fixed amount of virtual currency, which isn't true. They paid fiat currency to get virtual currency to get exactly one skin from a known set of options pursuant to a publicly disclosed odds. Right, but that's not a digital currency. Like, they did use a credit card transaction as like a intermediary for a cash transaction. That is the purpose of credit. But saying that is virtual currency is not necessarily representative of what's going on here. But saying that no matter what, you're allowed one skin from an option pursuant publicly disclosed, then the way every single casino could stop being gambling is if no matter what, you had a $1 buy-in, and no matter what you got at least a penny back. There you go. They're no longer gambling. Like, you know, this is entirely like, that's just doesn't make sense. If that is all that is required, then all that is necessary to turn every single casino in America to no longer be gambling is that. Why haven't they done that? If it's really just that simple. It isn't. This is not gambling. Recognize that the plaintiff did not suffer any economic injury because for each mystery box they purchased, they received exactly what they expected. Which, I will say, though, is true. They expected to receive something within the pool. And that is correct. But again, like, simply because they know that they're going to get something inside of the pool, just like when you buy, trading cards and stuff like that, doesn't necessarily mean you're getting what you want. And that's it's the obfuscation and the playing of probabilities. And that's what gambling is. Shit, people gamble with the stock market. People gamble with the stock market. You can gamble with anything. But that is something you need to be considerate of. These transactions are directly inaugural. My tongue is made of lead, okay? Everyone knows I can say that word. I just can't say it right now. To the purchase of sports trading cards and a host of other physical mystery boxes and monthly subscription services, which is fair. There are actually a lot of subscription services that effectively are the exact same thing. All of which, of course, perfectly legal. And that is 100% true, because there is no legal precedence to say otherwise. Right there, the Ninth Circuit affirmed dismissal of the RICO gambling claims against traders of card packs that randomly include valuables, chase cards, along an assortment of standard ones. Plaintiffs press the same theory. Transaction is illegal gambling if purchasers pay for the chance to receive a valuable item they are statistically unlikely to get. Oh, this might be Oh, that's a international LLP. I thought that was international case law, and I was like, what? International law doesn't have anything to do with a state law, to my knowledge. But no. The Ninth Circuit is California. Ninth. Oh, yeah, so it's this entire area. Ninth. Okay, so Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, isn't Nevada where it's Las Vegas? Yeah, it's Nevada. So, yeah. Hmm. So the RICO is, I forget what exactly that stands for. Racketeering, influencing, and corruption organizations, which was what was used against the mob, if I remember correctly. And it's quite powerful. But the thing is like if RICO was rejected against trading cards in the Ninth Circuit, I think that's a particular case that could defend loot boxes fundamentally. Um, hmm, happened in 2002. I don't know. Fundamentally, I am not impressed with loot boxes. I think they're inherently predatory. Um, and I really do think that the like whales, like the people that are spending so much money on these things, they have a mental health issue. Like you are effectively a gambling addict if you're heavily doing it. What was it? I'm trying to remember. It was like it was that mobile game. It was constantly Shadow Legends or something like that, like Riot Shadow Legends or something. Like those kind of games and like the microtransactions and the entire like whale economy that runs all of those games are inherently predatory, and it's pretty much preying upon vulnerable individuals to fund the games. And long term, that is likely going to cause fundamental issues further than what we're seeing with the AAA's industry if they become legally protected. Because like we're already seeing every game shoving microtransactions down like everyone's gullet. And like battle passes are inherently more user friendly because they're linear. You see exactly what they are. Yes, there's more predatory ways of utilizing it and fear of like FOMO and missing out and stuff like that. But across the board, it's at least a linear and set expectations that X amount of effort equates to X amount of reward. Where loot boxes, you don't necessarily have any control over than expending your own financial gain. Like you have to expend financial capital in order to have virtual gain. It's an interesting case though. That is a unusual thing to hear. The Ninth Circuit rejected that theory, holding that purchasing and trading cards do not suffer an injury cognizable. Cognizable. I mean, cognitive, but cognizable means of capable of being known, perceived, or legally. Okay, so it's something to do with your ability to like conceptually grasp. Hmm. May not receive an instant card because at the time the plaintiff purchased a pack of cards, which is the time the value of the package should be determined, they received value 8 or 10 cards, one of which might be an insert card for what they paid as purchase price. Although the court decided the case on standing principles, the court's interpretation of injury fully applied to the merits. There was no injury precisely because there was no stake or risk. Yeah, I mean, if that is if they agree that if you receive cards that are entirely less than the valuation of monetary spend, then yes, you could say that there is no injury or loss. I still have mixed feelings on it, but if that is the legal way they're looking at it, that is the legal way they're looking at it. And as stands, that's a massive hole in the boat. The Fifth Circuit reached the same conclusion. Which one is the fifth? Okay, where? Why is the other one? Why does this one pull up so much better visualization? So which one is the fifth? Okay. Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Okay. I'm just going to leave this open so I can, look at that. However, players in Valve games are not wagering with dollars. That is, yeah. I mean, at one way or another, it is coming from hard cash, though. I don't know if I agree with that portion, but this right, like the reason why they're probably throwing this in here is because they asked for the with prejudice. So if they throw all of this inside of the case and it's removed with prejudice, they have then like defense of like, oh, you're not allowed to bring us back again for this exact same thing because we had it dismissed with prejudice, which protects them on all of these individual claims. So it's smart. Like, this is a smart defense. It's well done. The only time players use real world currency is when they acquire a non transferable, revocable license to use virtual currency for entertainment purposes. So what they're saying, because there's layers to be able to do the gambling, that they're not gambling. Player loss, if any, therefore is complete at the moment of antecedent transaction, when players swap something of value, real money, for something of whimsy, pretend gold. Once the initial transaction is complete, players may spend their virtual Steam Wallet funds as they please. They can purchase games, hardware, or virtual items to enhance gameplay, or they can buy mystery boxes in keys. So they're saying because the Steam wallet exists, it is a block against any type of transaction because every transaction goes to the Steam wallet before the release of digital key for asset. That's an economist question. That's outside of my particular thoughts. I mean, I have my opinion on loot boxes because of, statistics and everything else and the way that I look at it, but as far as does that actually create enough of a layer to protect you from claimant of gambling? Because that's an interesting point. Keys may be held for as long as a player like. They need not to be used immediately after purchase or even refunded if unused. Thus, even if the mystery box aesthetically resembles classic games of chance, the underlying transaction is more akin to purchasing cinema or amusement park tickets. That's I guess you can actually refund those. I never thought about that before. I've never heard of anyone getting a refund for amusement park tickets or movie theater tickets. But that is a interesting statement. Yeah. Huh. Players pay for the pleasure of entertainment per se, not for the prospect of economic gain. That is fundamentally not true for some individuals engaging with their system. And they definitely know it. But I think there's enough of an argument there that you could say that they probably are, protected. Failed to plausibly allege a player stake or risk anything without the meaning of Article 225 when they purchase a mystery box key. Skin is not something of value. Users enjoy skins, but skins do not qualify as something of value under New York skin. Yeah, which is 100% true. I think that's right. Interesting. I guess since we don't own our games, they aren't actually property. That is 100% true. And that's also true. Like, they're not money, they're not. Theft offenses. Huh. Which would make. Actually, that's an interesting point because if they were actually recognized as property, like scammers in RuneScape would have had criminal charges. Hmm. This is a very interesting case, but like they're not doing this on accident. They're legitimately lining up everything that later on they could be taken to court for. Like I think they fundamentally sunk the department or sorry, the attorney general's like fundamental arguments with them. I think they sunk it. They put the cart before the horse, and now Steam is just going to try to run off with the horse entirely. And I think that some of the things they're doing definitely is worthy of being skeptical of because I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's healthy for Steam, and I don't think it's healthy for the games industry. Like, both cases are inherently predatory to the customer in a way that is not immediately apparent. However, the more you observe the individuals that heavily engage with these systems, there is something inherently wrong going on because nobody if there is no value to these things and there is no like purpose to them, why do people spend $3,000 on these things, $5,000? The reality is there is something going on and all parties are aware of it, and that's why this particular case is being brought out. But this isn't the right way to do it, and it's not a Valve directly problem, it's a legislation problem. And that's really the crux of the matter. They are trying to like persecute people as criminals for frankly ridiculous reasons. But you know, who was it? The Rockefeller Rothschilds? It was the Rothschilds. They've been going after Valve for quite a while, and I don't know if this, Attorney General has anything to do with them. But yeah, this is just I really think that while they had some interesting points, the Attorney General, they obviously didn't do their basic research because like literally what if you broke it down to just like a couple of these statements, like the damages, the not gambling by case law, like all of that is just ripping this apart at a fundamental level. And if they had really thought and looked at it, I think they would have realized they just put a massive problem for themselves because now Steam might literally just walk away with prejudice, and they're not going to see any fine for things that they probably shouldn't have done. Not that I particularly want Steam to get fined. I'd rather they fix their problems because they've earned my goodwill that I'm willing, like, personally, I'm willing to say that. Now, granted, legally, that's a different thing, but It's not a token or options. Well, yeah, they're keys. And that's the thing. Like, there is this weird kind of situation where they're not tokens, they're not objects, they're not exchangeable for money or anything. Oh, crud. Are you kidding me? Oh, well, that sucks. It's not money or property. There we go. So, like, there is definitely this kind of like weird middle case where things are being purchased but they're not really real, but at the same time they're being like transacted upon. It's like it's like having stock and taking out loans on it in a weird way. Like, it's not really being sold or used. They're just getting money and like leasing it to somebody else. But they're not owning it. They don't decide when it gets sold. But it's an asset to them now because of its collateral for the loan. So, it's like that weird situation. It's like the quasi ownership. Like, oh yeah, it's collateral, but it's not collateral. It's not like, actualized gains, but there are gains being made. It's not a like real token or anything else, but it's being used in this digital world. It, like, there's this weird kind of like pseudo like consumption that's going on, and it is taking real dollars, and real dollars are being exchanged, but somehow nothing is moving. And it's mostly built off of, you know it's bull. It's not real. And it shouldn't happen one way or another exactly, but it does happen. And it's creating, and because of this weird, hey, we've created something, but we're not handing something over, so it's not really being sold, but it's being sold. Like, so money is just constantly exchanging hands in a weird way, but nothing is being gained. And yet for some reason money is still shifting. Like, it's a really weird situation. And like, the law is not currently equipped to deal with this irregularity. Actually, you know what? I'm going to like slightly up my size just so, you know, I can be seen a little better. Because I am talking to you guys. The one person that might actually watch this. um Same word or phrase used in different part of the sentence. Exactly. They're digital. Exchangeable exchangeable for money or property. But again, you're able to exchange it inside of the game. And I will say, like, the Attorney General's point that you can take the wallet's like currency and turn it into like a Steam Deck or other hard assets. That's a novel thing. Easily solvable is if they take the hard assets out of the Steam wallet system, but then that's a whole nother, you know, that's a whole nother issue. Independent hardware for the community market and selling. You know, interesting, because they're multi-stepped. First, simply alleging that existence of third-party markets cannot be enough. If exchangeable for money or property encompasses any item that can there theoretically be resold, the definition would have no meaning or limiting principle. And courts have squarely rejected such arguments. NCAA's randomized ticket distribution system is not illegal lottery simply because tickets could be later resold at a greater price. So, scalpers. Many other types of collectibles, like baseball cards, have robust secondary markets where some fetch a higher price than others, but no one believes that makes them gamble. I don't necessarily agree with that. And actually, you could argue that scalping is gambling of a sort because they're effectively speculative buying. And speculative buying is also like a derivative of gambling in a way. But I don't really think that's a realistic, you know. The thing is gambling is inherent to the way we operate as humans. Like you are always taking chances and risks and associating value to things. So like the definition of gambling is applicable to so many things we just do generally in our life. You know, is it worth filling up our tank today, or maybe tomorrow the gas prices might go down a little bit and we might save a couple bucks? Or vice versa. Maybe we should, put a couple gallons of fuel in a jerry can somewhere because we think gas is going to go up to $10 and it's $5 right now. It's inherently speculation and gambling go hand in hand, and they're not exactly the same thing, but it's an interesting and novel thought process through this entire part and the legal issues with it. Moreover, Valve's SSA expressly prohibits. Yeah. Now, granted, I think there is a case because Valve hasn't stopped people from exchanging skins outside of Steam, like through the third party, like real money transfers and stuff like that. They didn't stop them. So, you know, I don't know how much this will explicitly hold up because of that precedent they've built. But but I don't think that's going to be a big issue or anything else. Well, I'm going to move on. Courts have appropriately held under gambling statutes similar to virtual items are not things of value where third party markets violate the terms of use. Oh, well, right there, that's another boom, another hole in the boat. That stands to reason Valve, like any other private video game developer, bears responsibility only for their own actions, which is completely sensible. Cannot seriously suggest that Valve should be held criminally liable for third party websites because it failed to shut them down, which it cannot do, or failed to enforce the SSA terms outside of Steam, which it also can't really do. Second, it also does not matter that a skin can be sold between users on the community market for virtual Steam wallet funds. Yeah. But then that makes a very interesting situation of like, what exactly then is the transaction, like legally, for like the Steam machine or Steam Deck or anything? If that is indeed the case, Valve is just sitting on their massive pool of money and they have a digital currency that's saying that it's US dollars, but it's not US dollars, it's Steam US dollars. So yeah. Wonder if they have a Steam ruble and a Steam pound. Sounds kind of questionable, a steamy pound. Um Steam wallet funds have no cash value and are not exchangeable for cash, and that's entirely true. Nor are Steam wallet funds property for the reasons discussed above. Superior section clarifying Steam wallet funds do not constitute personal property rights. Which actually makes an interesting case because, like, you don't, when you die, you can't really transfer over your ownership of keys or, like, the account over to your next of kin. But man, this is every time law and Steam like come together, it is always an interesting thought like process just to run through. And they didn't do it on accident. Steam was smart. There are some insanely intelligent guys there. Okay, let's keep going. Finally, hypothetical transactions whereby a player buys Steam hardware and resells it for cash at an electronics store outside of Steam does not solve the problem because the statutes says nothing about indirect multi-step transactions. Indeed, the very next clause addresses below defines something of value to include a form of credit or promise directly or indirectly contemplating transfer of money or property. Emphasis added, but the clause defines tokens, objects, or articles has no comparable language. The law presumes that omission was deliberate. Hypothetical attenuated transactions do not qualify. Otherwise, every purchase that involves an element of randomness and can later be sold, even something as innocuous as buying a Happy Meal and reselling the toy it contains, would amount to gambling. And that's kind of my point between like speculation and gambling and like the entire weird thing that's going on. But in a way, the Happy Meal is a one to one. No, actually, some of the Happy Meals had multiple toys inside of them. So yeah, actually, that is a fair argument right there. Yeah, skins aren't a form of credit or promise. I mean, that is obvious. I'm not going to take a lot of time on that. Players do not stake or risk anything upon agreement with Valve. That's not entirely true, but I understand where they're coming from. A person engages in illegal gambling only when he or she risks or stakes something of value upon an agreement or understanding that he or she might receive something of value in return. Again, that isn't the case because of there's no precedent, there's no legal infrastructure to go and determine that is occurring. But the reason why they're going and explicitly calling this out is for that, with prejudice. If that occurs, this could shield them or help shield them for a time. Such a wagering agreement is that a participant pays or enters into a game of chance where only one party to the agreement can win. Conversely, it is not gambling to pay a fixed fee to receive a surprise prize for a known set of options. The Court of Appeals recently reaffirmed that long-standing rule. I don't know. I guess technically speaking, Schrodinger's box is kind of involved with this in a weird way that digital currency doesn't have it. Because when you're talking about like the Happy Meal, or a pack of cards or the kits or whatever you'd buy, the monthly subscription surprise kit stuff, you get a Schrodinger's box situation. You both do and don't make money, and you have like a theoretical thing and you don't have a theoretical thing. You physically are holding something of particular value when you're doing that initial transaction. With a digital transaction, there is no Schrodinger's box. It's not like there is they give you a table of saying, hey, look, you have this set of options with this set of probabilities. But at the end of the day, it is a entirely predictable random number generator that is just going to determine which lot you're getting. And sure, every single lot is filled, but effectively it's like a roulette wheel. Like you are putting money in, and no matter what, one of those lots are going to be hit. So it's down to, is it going to be the lot that you particularly wanted in order to get that particular item that you were looking for? That's the way I kind of equate it. It's like when you look at it from that lens, the not risk or stake anything because you are getting something for a fixed fee. I fundamentally feel like this is iffy. To ever wager, there must be two or more contracting parties having mutual or reciprocal rights. Valve does not stand to lose or gain anything when a player opens a mystery box because they've already gained. The seconds that they've purchased that key or mystery box, they've already gained. So they're right, you don't have anything there, but you have a reason for them to continuously buy it. I mean, we saw in the other video of the guy opening up multiple loot boxes back to back to back. Yeah, they don't gain anything individually, it's all together. Yeah, never more, never less. And it's the exact same. What was it? It's like slot machines. They don't get any more money from people like putting in. There's a certain number of pulls that you're getting for each like input. Granted, like like there's definitely a mix and matching of multiple different like gambling principles with digital like random chance events, but like this isn't. It's not a linear process. And because there's so many layers to this and how everything works, it really comes down to the fact that there has to be a better understanding around how this all works. And if they just like really the thing that would solve my personal gripe with all of this, turn it into adult only. Gambling is an adult only thing. Don't go and deny that people can't have it, but just put it as if you purchase it, you have to be an adult, 21 years and older. Why not? Like that right there, you solve the entire problem and it's no longer a question. It's not hurting anyone. They're adults. They can drink alcohol and do everything else. Why not? Like that legitimately this is a legislation problem, not a business problem. Valve does not stand to lose or gain anything when players open a mystery box and receive a particular skin. Valve receives $2 whatever, nor does the sum of purchase sales mystery boxes. No wagering agreement is involved. Not on that end. That is true. When the money is handed over in Valve's particular case, there is no wagering, but whatever. I wonder if that's why all the different games that have loot boxes normally have a secondary, like a currency that's transacting to shift, like the. Because all of them don't have you spending direct cash. It's gems or gold or whatever it is. It's going to a digital currency that they own, and then it's being used as a layer between. And I have to wonder if the reason why they're doing that is exactly so that they can go and say that there is no like real money transaction to gamble. You know, that's probably why, like, and I pointed this out, like, on Reddit posts and stuff like that. Like, there are literally lawyers whose their job is to figure out how to monetize legally. And they do things purposely and set up cases and precedent and stuff like that, specifically so that when things start getting a little iffy, they have legs to defend themselves on the questionable actions. So it's a novel case for sure. Shows that the defendant acted knowingly with respect to advancing or profiteering. And yeah, and because there was no like precedent for them to even go and say like, "Hey, look, we were gambling." Yeah. Culpable mental state. And this is all we've already gone through this. I don't think I need to go through this again. If you want to like read this, pause and pause here. Would criminalize Valve's conduct without fair notice in violation of due process in the First Amendment of separation of powers, which is 100% correct. Yeah. And that's like literally straight up laws which regulating persons or entities must give fair notice of conduct that is forbidden or required. The U.S. Supreme Court has therefore held for over a century that a statute which either forbids or requires the doing of an act in terms so vague that men of common intelligence must necessarily guess at its meaning and defer as to its applications violates the first essence of due process law, which I think is very true in this case. Because, like, if you're fine with trading cards, then I think that's actually a very fair argument. And I'm fine with, like, I enjoy trading cards. I'd rather go and purchase directly the card that I want instead of going and doing like a random booster set. Like, I think commander decks are a perfectly fine and acceptable way of going and doing things. And I think Magic the Gathering should sell cards on an individual basis. But yeah, I think this entire thing is, yeah, there's a lot of fundamental things going on that would make things more consumer friendly, but at the same time, I understand the ecosystem as it currently stands, and I don't necessarily blame people for enjoying it and preferring it this way because it is far more interesting. Like, let's be real, this is far more interesting than if everything was a one-to-one transaction and very straightforward and cut and dry. Like, they are entirely right when they say that this is an entertainment, or up above was entertainment and everything else, because that's really the entire like secondary marketplaces and trading with your friends and finding businesses that have the particular card that you're looking for. Like, that is a lot of fun, but it is also anti-consumer. And in a weird way, it's also pro-consumer as well, though. But it's like, it's this really weird. It's a really weird set of things, I think, is the easiest way of calling it. And at the end of the day, it's not any single one of our decision on what is right or wrong. It is us effectively pushing for proper representation that's going to create legislation that will then dictate how exactly we should govern ourselves and behave. That is the American society that we live in. That is how it's supposed to work. Everything else going on is different. But, like, at the end of the day, our representatives going and trying to criminally charge individuals or businesses without due process is inherently wrong and is a bastardization of the legal system. And I think Valve is entirely correct that it should get thrown out. I really don't think that they should get with prejudice because of how much other stuff they're sneaking in and connecting it to purposefully, to like, they're giving other people shields, but they're doing it to give themselves a deeper shield to hide behind. Like, this is brilliantly done. But there's definitely something, and I don't think that the New York Attorney General is entirely wrong with the gambling statements. I think that they, frankly, they merged multiple problems into one thing, and I don't know if they misrepresented or misunderstood how certain things work, but across the board, I think they're on something that a lot of people are aware of, especially when you're more pro-consumer. Because at the end of the day, all of this stuff can be taken away from you, right? Because you don't own the base key. You don't own the base product, even though you're getting a sale for the game or something else. If you're paying $60 for the game or whatever, or you're paying $4 for the skin or whatever, you have no way of keeping it the day they decide to just flip a switch. You don't have any way to maintain your ownership over the resources that you've spent money for one way or another for a transaction. And it's not saying you're leasing, it's not saying you're renting, it is a purchase. And they say it, they're purposely notarizing and denoting it as a purchase. And when you're sent the bill, the transaction is labeled as a purchase. So at the end of the day, there are purchases going on. There is some degree of ownership that the customer is owned, but the current legal infrastructure is not. We don't currently have the laws necessary to effectively govern a digital age. And we're seeing businesses and even governments going and taking advantage against, the consumer and against their constituents, their citizens, to like take advantage of them and, spy on them or, steal whatever assets they do own or resell their information, invade their own personal privacy. And like the government's utilizing businesses to go and, effectively run a massive, what do you call it? Plate reading system to live track everyone that's going, flock. So, like, there is something that the New York Attorney General is indeed touching on that we don't currently have working for this age. And we are behind the ball, and I think a lot of people recognize that we're behind the ball, but this is not how you, get on top of the ball. This was wrong, is my take. Brazen reinterpretation of Article 225 wrested authority from the legislature and choice, and yeah. Stating that they're not getting fair notice. Impermissibility reinterprets key terms. Interesting. Stakes or risk, something of value, and agreement. I think because of the misunderstanding, they are going to potentially reinterpret these terms. But I think the reality is the terms that are currently being used are inaccurate. They're inaccurate to the digital age. Because at the end of the day, the way that the digital age is operating, there's no universal governing body for how digital ownership works. And how like free and open source and everything else kind of operates. Because look at OpenAI, which was an open source company that was, a bunch of researchers and stuff. And then they just took it private. They took a bunch of people's work without any compensation or support or anything and turned it into a business and closed their doors to the public. And like, don't get me wrong, Elon Musk can suck it. But like that isn't exactly right. There very much should have been an open source vector still left of the original materials. And, it's also extremely questionable to take all those people's contributions and put it inside of a walled garden. I believe like Sam Altman even had like text showing, it's like, I can't even believe we're able to do this. Like, he even acknowledges that ethically it doesn't, there's something wrong. And everyone knows there's something wrong. But the thing is if nobody can like point to a piece of paper and say, that says you're not doing it right, like they just walk away with it because there isn't enough pieces of paper set up for the digital age to really defend or defend the consumer and defend like the citizens of the countries. And it's not just the United States, this is a global problem. Valve lacks fair notice. There's no risk. Again, playing Valve's games are not wagering real money, aesthetically. Same goes for attempt to extend terms something of value. And this is just going. ex post facto, not habeas corpus. Ex post facto application of its interpretation of Article 225 is unconstitutional. Yeah, you're not allowed to go and like before the law exists punish people. Like once the law exists, you're supposed to punish them after that fact. But if like the law is just made and everyone stopped before the law came into effect, you're not allowed to go and prosecute them because like 3 months ago they were still doing stuff. Like, yeah, ex post facto. So, yeah. And I mean, this is a huge thing right there. And that's really where they catch everybody and give themselves a lot of coverage. Violates the First Amendment and infringes on New York's separation of powers doctrine, and that's true. I mean, I've already talked through a lot of this. I recommend pausing. Yeah, but again, this doesn't have anything to do with skins. This has to do with the loot boxes. Loot boxes are not recognized as such. Yeah, but the loot box is not a feature of the skin. You can buy a skin directly in multiple other instances. Steam does not allow you to do that, but that still does not mean that the loot box is the skin. And they know that. Like, they 100% know that, but they're just trying to give themselves as much protective covering as possible in the off chance they get that with prejudice. Because that would give them so much if they get it. I mean, I disagree with that. I'm sure lawyers will figure out another way to do something. Like, come on, man. They're just trying to run away with the entire farm. Interest. I don't know about that. I that's when I read their case, I don't necessarily know how that would affect it. They should go into more detail on that because I don't necessarily know if I agree with that statement. Chill white sauce. Yeah, that's again, they're making the assertion that they don't really have, I think. Uninclusive, right? A serious doubts whether the government is in fact pursuing the interests it invokes rather than disfavoring a particular speaker or viewpoint, claims an interest in ending gambling because it can lead to addiction and result to real harm. Valve's mystery boxes use the same mechanisms and psychological lures as traditional casinos. That's true. Valve changed its like entire system so that it looked less like a slot machine, but still the fundamentals are there. New York's constitution allows casinos and other forms of gambling. Indeed, the Constitution has been repeatedly amended to expand legal gambling. While the government needs not address all aspects of problems in one fell swoop, approach has single-handed out the purveyors of video games, indeed Valve specifically, for disfavored treatment and has given no persuasive reason why. And that I 100% agree. Because it literally does not make sense that this particular case is getting brought to Valve's case in singularity. It should be an industry entire leveled accusation, which is an entirely different thing. Games features with the NYAG identifies as addictive, such as the innovative video game monetization inventions and ideas intended to lure and addict users, is a very broad category of content that may be addictive for some individuals but not for others. I mean, yeah, that's true. Some people are more susceptible and other people are less, but everyone has some degree of impact from gambling because of speculation. It's like the overlap between like gambling and speculation. Everyone does it to some degree or another in their life. But how exactly that takes form and whether or not that's detrimental to the individual is a really complex subject in psychology. Actually, psychology and sociology, because they're both heavily involved. Yeah, this is children's stuff. I'm just going to let that go there. Also finds foundational New York separation of power. Again, we've already gone through this. I'm just going to let you guys pause it here. Okay. Okay. Potential violations of the First Amendment and separation of power doctrine also requires a heightened due process analysis that the New York Attorney General cannot survive. And I agree with that as well. But again, this is like I'm at a 2 hour long video on this. Like this has gone on so long at this point. I'm exhausted. And this is far more readable than the New York Attorney General's, but yeah. Of course, they wanted to have their stuff be not counted as gambling, which is the most like quiet acknowledgement of like, yeah, maybe you could kind of consider it gambling, but at the very least, reasonable susceptibility to a different interpretation. According to the court, can apply the twin doctrines of constitutional avoidance and lenity to exclude mystery boxes from a statute's reach. The constitutional avoidance doctrine teaches that a statute should be construed whenever possible in a way that avoids placing its constitutionality in doubt. Lenity principles similarly dictate that a criminal statute should be interpreted in the defendant's favor where there are two plausible constructions. As discussed, Article 225 can easily be read to exclude mystery boxes. That reading would still allow the statute to capture traditional gambling's activity under the statute's plain meaning and allow the legislature to address any concerns posed by mystery boxes as it deemed necessary, all the while avoiding serious notice concerns and protecting freedom of expression and separation of powers. The court should opt for that narrow interpretation, aka just ignore any degree of questionability. If it is gambling, just ignore it. It's like oh, that's pretty funny. It's like, here's all the reasons why you shouldn't think it's gambling. Don't like think it's gambling. Don't think it's gambling. Don't think it's gambling. Don't think it's gambling. Don't think it's gambling. Like this is all it's definitely not gambling. It's definitely not gambling. It's definitely not gambling. And then you get all the way down to the very end. It's like if it is gambling, just ignore it. Oh man. Oh, that was okay. Wow. Okay, we got to the end. That was pretty funny. All right. I'm done with this. That was fascinating. I hope you all have a great day and I will see you all later. Adios.